And it'll say good day to you this day of your time. How are you all? All right, thank you. Once again, we thank each and every one of you individually and all of you together collectively for the co-creation of this interaction. We would like to begin this transmission by stating the title, Shedding New Light on Negative Beliefs, and present to you a new way, a new perspective of looking at how negative beliefs function so that you can have a clearer idea of how to let them go. If that is what you prefer, of course. We have had many conversations with many of you in which people have stated that they feel certain energies that are blocking them. Certain kinds of energies or forces that are preventing them from doing this or doing that. Sometimes even talking about the idea of external forces and external energies that don't allow them to do one thing or another, or are allowing them to feel that they are being controlled by some other kind of force or energy from somewhere. The first thing that is very important to understand in this concept that we are sharing with you today is that anything that you experience internally is your energy, no one else's. It cannot be any other way. You have your energy, and everything you experience in life is made of your energy, is happening in your energy. Now, this doesn't mean that there can't be other beings that you may be interacting with or aligning with that have their own energy and maybe have their own agendas and maybe have their own intentions. Whether they be beings that are human or non-human isn't the point. The point is that no matter what anyone else's agenda may be or intention toward you may be, the only way you can experience it is by matching the vibration with your own energy and thus creating a representation of what it is they may be attempting to pass along to you. But you're creating that experience, that internal experience of what you call their energy out of your own energy, because that's the only thing you have to work with, is you, in your reality. So the idea, bringing this down to the concept of beliefs, and more specifically, the idea of negative beliefs, we have talked about the idea how negative beliefs, like any belief, will attempt to perpetuate themselves, doing whatever they need to do to prevent you from letting go of them. But when you feel the idea, when you express the idea that some form of energy is stopping you from doing this or that, it's very important to remember that all you're actually feeling is your energy. Beliefs do not have their own energy in the context of this concept. They have to use your energy and get you to feel your energy in a certain way in order for you to have the experience that you are assigning to them as their energy. So they are borrowing your energy, siphoning off your energy, filtering your energy through the belief and reflecting it to you in a certain vibration that is representative of the belief in order to give you an experience that something else is controlling you, something else is forcing you, something else is pressing its energy upon you. But it's all you. Every single bit of it is your energy. So in order to make this idea a little bit clearer, we would like to use an analogy, since we have titled this Shedding Light, of the light bulb on your planet. A light bulb has no power of its own. You have to plug it in or screw it in to the socket where the energy, the electricity, is then capable of reaching the light bulb and illuminating it. Beliefs are like light bulbs. You are like the electric current. When you screw in a particular belief, then that is the bulb that lights up. But it doesn't have energy of its own. All you have to do is recognize that it is simply an, shall we say, delivery system that lets you know that energy is being run through it. It is an indicator that energy is being run through it and activating it, illuminating it, allowing you to experience that feeling, that sensation that the energy is coming from something somewhere, and I don't know where, and I don't know if I'm in control. But again, it's all you. And all you have to do is unscrew the light bulb, and it will go out. Stop feeding it the energy. It will have no way of illuminating. It will have no way of allowing you to feel anything. You will know you are not being controlled by anyone but yourself. But when you filter that electric current, that energy, through the light bulb belief system, you get what you are flowing the energy to. You get that particular light turning on. But you can turn it off very easily by understanding that it is something that has no energy on its own. You can imagine actually unscrewing that negative belief and being able to look at it in a neutral state for what it is. It's just a light bulb. It's just a device that lets you know where your energy is flowing. So if you don't prefer the feeling, if you don't prefer that feeling of some energy coming from somewhere or some force blocking you or preventing you from doing something, you just have to start seeing that as your energy flowing through a light bulb of a certain type. And if it's not the type of illumination that you prefer, imagine yourself literally unscrewing that light bulb and just looking at it now that it has gone out and realizing that you can change it. You can screw in a new light bulb that is one of your liking, one of your preference. Let's look at it another way as well, continuing this analogy a bit further. Imagine yourself in general as absolutely transparent, so transparent that other people might think of you as invisible. And light passes right through you. All sorts of forms of concepts and energy pass right through you, just like a glass window. Nothing impedes those things. The things that you experience are only when you decide that certain areas of that transparent being need to suddenly become translucent or opaque. You create that opacity that allows the light now to have a place to reside, either translucently, where it lights you up in that area, or even completely opaque, which means then you start reflecting that light back to others based on whatever the opaque area is designed to reflect, be it positive or negative. So another way to understand that this energy is always flowing through you from source is to understand that if something is feeling a little out of alignment, out of whack, as you say, off kilter, there may be belief systems that are allowing certain areas of your being, of your existence, to become more opaque or translucent, and they can be allowed to become more transparent, allowing that energy to just flow right through you like a window. So it doesn't stop. It has nowhere to reside, unless it's something that you prefer. And then you can grab it and become opaque in that area and reflect back that light to others, knowing that it is exactly what you prefer to reflect. And you can decide in what areas you choose to be opaque and what vibrations you choose to be opaque. And those things that don't relate to you, those things that you don't prefer, those things that have nothing to do with you being you, let them be transparent. Let the light pass through. They have nothing to do with you. That energy is for someone else to interpret in their own way. For someone else to take that light bulb and screw it in and get illuminated based on that vibration, that concept, that frequency. So imagine yourselves now in any given situation that you have experienced, may be experiencing now, or will ever experience. Imagine that sensation that you are feeling, some kind of energy, some kind of force It may feel like a blockage. It may feel like an emotion. It may feel like fear, for example. But you have to begin to understand that you are simply feeling another state of your own energy. It cannot come from anywhere else, because even if it does, as we said, you still have to create your own version of it in order to actually have an experience. You have to match that frequency to have an experience of it. And by doing that, you are making that happen. You are creating that sensation out of your own energy. No one can affect you directly in that sense. You have to agree to affect yourself. So allow yourself to start really understanding that whatever it is you experience internally in any way, shape, or form is made out of your energy. It's all yours, you own it, and you can do whatever you prefer to with it. And start thinking in terms of beliefs being these little light bulbs that you can unscrew and screw in as you prefer to do so. Choosing the illumination that you prefer. Use this analogy and it will begin to work for you. Practice with this and you will start to understand that the beliefs themselves have no power. They're just a device to allow you to feel your power, your energy in the way that you believe at that particular moment works for you, be it positive or negative. Because remember, you don't experience anything that you don't believe serves you. So even if you recognize you may be choosing things that you empirically and intellectually understand do not serve you, the only way you would be choosing them and having that experience is you have a belief system, you have a light bulb that you're passing your energy through that illuminates the situation in such a way as to make it seem to be the thing that does serve you. And then you have something to work with because you realize that the only way it would appear that way is because of the light bulb that you've screwed into the socket. Unscrew it and watch it go out. And take a moment to examine all the different beliefs, all the different light bulbs. Choose the one that you prefer. Choose the kind of illumination that you prefer. And screw that one in. The same energy that powered the negative one will power the positive one because they don't have power of their own. It's you that's powering them all. Every single moment. Does this make sense? Yeah. All right. So you can use this as a different analogy for the concept of enlightenment. We thank you for the gift you are giving us in allowing us to experience each and every one of you. And in return for that gift, we ask you now, how may we be of service to you? You may start your dialogues if you wish.
Bashar, Darryl Anka. Okay, great. Guys, everybody got their tickets? Okay. Perfect. So again, thank you all so very much for coming, and thank you to Darryl and Bashar for opening up this portal to this exciting adventure for this weekend. Thank you, Darryl and Bashar.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. As many of you know, there is, from time to time, another entity that comes through named Willa Hillicrissing. She's another future self of mine, but whereas Bashar is on a different planet, Willa is actually a hybrid 700 years in our future. So, inspired by the general ideas of what she is experiencing in her life, I am in the process of writing a series of books about that as a story. Now, it's inspired by a lot of the things that she's experiencing, but it's not a literal transcription of her life. So it is a science fiction fantasy novel. I just want to make that clear so people, when they hear this, don't think that it's actually literally everything in here is happening to her. But it's very inspirational. It's a fun thing to do. And it does contain, a lot of the experiences that she's having. The first book in the series of 5 books is basically done. And we're just editing and tweaking it at this point. And then we'll be getting it to a publisher. But what I've brought tonight are the first few chapters that I will enjoy reading to you if you would enjoy hearing them. So pretend that there's a crackling fireplace somewhere and we're having just sort of a little fireside read. Okay, the 5 books are indicative of the different phases of training that she is actually going through in her life. And the first phase is called cryptic. The second is called nocturnal. The third is called shapeshifter. The fourth is called sage. And the fifth is called wraith. And this is a training, a mastery that many beings in that time frame go through to help connect them to different and higher levels of creation and express those kinds of energies and abilities on the earth. So our story begins when Willa is just entering the training to become a cryptic. So it's at the very beginning when she's 13 years old, and the series will end when she's somewhere around 17 or 18. Similar to the idea of the Harry Potter series, but with a female. So we will begin here. This series is called Shards of a Shattered Mirror. This is book 1, Cryptic. Chapter 1 is Three Rock Mountain. At the beginning of every chapter, so you understand what's being read here, there are excerpts from fictional books that are actually part of their future history. So just so you understand, when you hear me read a quote from a book and say that it's an excerpt from something, that's what's happening. It's not so much part of the direct story, but it forms an understanding of the reality that they live in and books and other things that has been written at that time. Is that pretty clear? Okay. First excerpt. After open contact occurred between humans and extraterrestrial hybrids, technology was introduced to Earth that proved the existence of parallel realities. As humans and hybrids mingled over time, their offspring exhibited the ability to perceive these alternate realities directly with their natural senses. With further practice and training, our human hybrid ancestors developed the skill into a science that gave rise to the cryptics, nocturnal, shapeshifters, sages, and wraiths that exist in our society today, 700 years after the landing. This is an excerpt from A Hybrid History by Holly Cotton. The story begins. If time is an illusion, isn't time travel an illusion too? Willa prodded in her soft Irish brogue. Willa Hillicrissing, a slender, blossoming 13-year-old human hybrid, sat on a soft meadow grass, legs crossed. Her larger-than-human butterscotch eyes gazed up at her mentor, Holly Cotton, who was also a descendant of the hybrids that came to Earth in the dimly remembered 21st century. Actually, Willa was staring at the back of Holly's head, which was capped with long silver-white tresses that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Holly turned away from the nano-glass computer screen that floated in the air in front of her, glanced at Willa's eager elfin face, which was framed by a wild cinnamon mane that always reminded Holly of fox fur. So, said Holly in an accent far more ancient, you've been listening all along. I listen, Willa protested, but to what things? There are many things to ken in the forest besides the sound of my voice. Willa cocked her head toward the dense grove of willow trees at the edge of the meadow. Birds, insects, winds in the leaves, water rushing over rocks, Willa offered. Holly humphed. You still hear so little, Willa. Willa bristled. What else is there? Listen, said Holly. Willa stared at the largest willow perched on the bank of a meandering stream. A section of loamy soil had eroded away, exposing a tangle of roots that reached toward the life-giving water as it burbled by, just out of reach. Willa knew that her great-grandmother had been named after the willow. The tree was also Willa's namesake, but it had taken only 4 generations for the name to evolve, as names often do, from willow to Willa. Most off-world hybrids had adopted a name from nature after the landing, early 700 years ago, and the custom eventually crystallized into tradition. Willa! Willa's attention snapped to Holly's ice-blue eyes. Daydreaming isn't a lesson you need to learn, Holly remarked. Willa straightened her posture. I was thinking about how different Earth must have been before the landing, before deconstruction and restoration. Thorne told me most of the world was paved in stone. Concrete and cement, Holly corrected. The world wasn't exactly covered with it, but, well, it might as well have been, I suppose. Cities of concrete and steel sprawled over deforested ground, connected by a web of hard black roads that stretched for thousands of miles in all directions.
Once off-world tech was gifted to the human population, it all began to change. Now, Port Paris, Port New York, Port Beijing are mere villages compared to what they once were. But this isn't a history lesson, little fox. We were talking about listening to the trees. Actually, said Willa, we were talking about time. Holly smiled. So we were. Let's see what else you recall. What are the 5 levels of mastery? Willa sighed, resigned to the lesson. Everybody knows that. Cryptics, nocturnals, shapeshifters, sages, wraiths. Oh, everybody knows that, do they? Well, don't they? Willa said, wondering if this was one of the trick questions Holly often used to test Willa's grasp of her lessons. The titles are obvious, Holly said. The skills that go with them, not so much. Okay, Willa nodded, accepting the challenge. Cryptics can communicate with nature, with elementals, trees, and even rocks. Nocturnals can see alternate realities and learn things about them. Shapeshifters can, well, change their shape. Sages are like the ancient human idea of wizards and witches. They can alter physical matter. And wraiths are kind of like living ghosts. Holly gazed at the tall yew trees that lined the edge of the meadow and slowly shook her head. Isn't that right? Willa said, slightly annoyed by Holly's cool demeanor. You make the skills sound like magic tricks, Holly said. They're much more than that. They require a deep understanding of the nature and structure of parallel realities, of space and time, of existence itself. Holly shifted her gaze to the sun low in the sky. And speaking of time, let's call it a day. Holly tapped the nanoglass screen 3 times. It shrank to the size of a marble. Holly snatched it from the air and tucked it in one of the many pockets in her flowing knee-length tunic. Willa stood and stretched in the golden sunset light and then ran to catch up to Holly as she strolled across the meadow. What do you hear when you listen to the trees? Asked Willa. Stories, replied Holly. Stories of the past, the present, and the future. Willa cupped her ear in the direction of the grove. I don't hear any stories except the tall one that you're telling me now. Holly smiled. Then you're listening with the wrong ears. I only have 2, Willa said. On the outside, Holly said with the same enigmatic smile, you need to listen from within. Why are cryptics always so cryptic? Willa said. My job as your mentor isn't to answer your questions, dear Willa, but to teach you how to answer them yourself. They walked along the bank of the stream, listening to the rippling water as it coursed over smooth stones. Willa tried to match Holly's gliding stride without looking conspicuous. I suppose the stream has a story too, Willa joked. Everything does, said Holly. For example, I know that in your story, you like Thorn very much. Willa stopped dead in her tracks, thunderstruck. Holly kept walking as though she had commented on nothing more important than the weather. Willa shook off her surprise and ran to catch up. Well, yes, of course I like Thorn, Willa sputtered. You met him yesterday after sunset in this very grove, and the day before that, and the day before that, Holly said. Willa's face blushed red as her hair. No one knows. The trees know, said Holly. You're saying the trees told you that trees can tell you lots of things, Holly said, if you know how to listen. They walked in silence until they crested a small hill with a mass of large gray boulders on top, 3 of which rose above the others, bestowing the name 3 Rock Mountain upon the area since long before the landing. Holly and Willa strolled down the gentle slope toward the Shaddock, a spiral structure similar to Stonehenge, but fashioned from large, shimmering blocks of nanoglass. There were 10 wide gaps in the upright slabs, spanned by thick lintels. 9 of the spaces rippled with transparent rainbow hues like oil on water. The 10th was empty, a simple passage that allowed entrance to the center of the spiral. Willow followed Holly through the entry passage. Tomorrow then, said Holly. Willa nodded, afraid to speak lest Holly raise the subject of Thorn again. Holly favored Willa with a reassuring smile, stepped through one of the shimmering portals, and vanished. Willa exhaled with relief, collected her wits, turned and disappeared through a portal on the opposite side. Change of scene. Ashgrove Cottage was more accurately described as a large ashwood arbor that served as a scaffold for thick vines blooming with violet cathedral bells that swayed gently in the evening breeze. A soft, warm glow emanated from several luminaria globes that floated in the air outside the arbor. Rowan Ashgrove regarded his younger brother Thorn with the large velvet black eyes that ran in their hybrid family. Though he was only 17 and a mere 2 years older than Thorn, Rowan had worn the mantle of adulthood ever since their father, Cale Ashgrove, vanished a year ago on an exploratory mission to the Orion Nebula, the 3rd such mission to vanish without a trace. Several of Rowan's classmates began calling the region the Orion Triangle, and the name stuck. Earth had been in a less enlightened, had Earth been in a less enlightened age, many would have considered the Ashgrove family to be cursed due to the fact that Cale's absence mirrored the mysterious disappearance of Rowan and Thorne's mother, Celandine Ashgrove, 3 years before. So that's where you've been going every night, Rowan said to Thorne in a sagacious tone when he learned of his secret trysts with Willa. Do Willa's parents know? Willa and I haven't told them, and neither will you, Thorne said. Rowan caught the hint of a nervous plea buried in Thorne's imperious tone. He would never betray his brother's trust, of course, but that didn't mean he couldn't tease him to within an inch of his impetuous young life. Just her mother, then? Rowan said, suppressing a mischievous smile. No, Thorne shot back. The plea was more evident this time. I wonder what father would have thought, Rowan mused, his own son wanting to learn to be a cryptic, and a nocturnal at that. We've been a family of explorers for generations. I am exploring, just not out among the stars. I think father would be proud and happy that I'm following my dream. And yet you don't want anyone to know. Rowan fixed his obsidian eyes on Thorne. Is it your dream, or is this more about Willa? Thorne averted his brother's bottomless gaze. What's wrong with that? Nothing, Rowan admitted. You may be making the right choice, but is it for the right reason? The path of a cryptic isn't for everyone. What if it's Willa's path, but not yours? Willa and I can still be together, Rowan. Can you? Rowan shot back. Do you ken what it really means to become a cryptic, a nocturnal, a shapeshifter, a sage? What if Willa chooses to go further than that? Will you still be together if she becomes a wraith? That's just a myth, Thorne said. Many myths contain the seed of truth, Rowan said. I've heard stories. Sometimes a sage who becomes a wraith can forget who they once were and transforms into a banshee, trapped between the world of the living and the dead. Oh, you're making that up, Thorne said, though his confidence was beginning to waver. I'm not saying you can't have a life together, Rowan said more gently. Just that you'd better understand what that life would be. I'm sure father, wherever he is, would be happy and proud that you're following your dream, but in father's absence, it's my job to make sure your dream doesn't become a nightmare. Rowan selected a blue nanoglass bead from the download dimple on the countertop. He tapped it and expanded it into a tablet. He did a quick check of the data, tapped the tablet again. It shrank back to a bead, and Rowan headed out. Where are you going? Thorne asked. We're finally starting first contact simulations tonight. In 3 years, I'll be wearing the sigil of a first contact specialist. Rowan flicked the bead in the air, caught it, and tucked it into a small pocket. Rowan, there was a wavering tone in Thorne's voice that made him sound more like a lost child than a boy of 15. Rowan stopped and waited. You'd never go to Orion like father, right? Don't worry, Rowan said. The triangle's been quarantined. Thorne nodded, relieved. Rowan pushed down his own sad memories and hurried out into the cool night air. Change of scene. Willa's family lived in a spun, nanoglass spherical treehouse perched high in an ancient oak. In the early morning light, it looked like a giant glistening cocoon. The nest, as her mother dubbed it, contained several large chambers that served as rooms, with Willa's at the very top where she had the best view of the verdant countryside. Willa awoke to the muted drumming of a black and white great spotted woodpecker as it searched for breakfast outside her room. What was once a rare bird in Ireland now populated many of the forests and groves on the outskirts of Port Dublin. Willa tapped the frosted nanoglass wall next to her hammock. A large, transparent circle appeared in the wall and framed the woodpecker like a spotlight. Willa gazed at the bright red cap on the nape of the bird's neck and identified it as a male. The bird continued to hunt for food as Willa listened to its staccato beat. Willa, morning meal. Her mother's melodic voice hung in the air as the walls softly reverberated like crystal wind chimes. As Willa rose from the hammock, her gossamer blanket formed to her lithe frame and transformed into a one-piece garment that covered everything but her head, hands, and feet. She placed her bare feet on the smooth, cool floor and stepped onto the spiral nanoglass staircase. The stairs instantly lowered her to the floor below like an escalator. Lily Hillicrissing, Willa's mother, didn't look a day over 30, though she was twice that age. Her graphite-colored hair was woven in a long Celtic braid that hung down her back to her trim waist. Her eyes were large, cool pools of deep lapis. Lily watered the herbs in the hydroponic garden that made up half of the small kitchen. Willa padded into the room, still half asleep, her fox fur hair tousled like a thistletop. Lily glanced over at her daughter and nodded to the hollowed-out bubble in the kitchen wall that served as the breakfast nook. "Mornin', Puka," Lily chimed. Lily started using the nickname ever since Willa announced her intention to become a cryptic like Holly, a Puka being a nature being that can bestow the secret of shapeshifting to cryptics who are skillful enough to curry its favor. Willow also heard rumors that Pukas can sometimes be difficult and mischievous creatures, which made her wonder if that was the real reason her mother had chosen the pet name. Willa sat at a table before a small plate of ripe melon slices and popped one in her mouth. The cool, sweet juice always helped her wake up. "Holly said she's waiting for you at the Port Dublin Shaddock," Lily said as she tended her little garden with the greatest of care. Willa looked up from her plate. "Port Dublin, not Three Rock? Do you know me to be hard of hearing?" Willa bolted for the spiral staircase, which lifted her up to her room as smoothly as it had brought her down. A change of location always meant that Holly had a new adventure in store for Willa, one that would surely be another step on the path to becoming a full-fledged cryptic. Willa was back in the kitchen in less than 60 seconds, dressed in a slick, cinnamon-hued nanosuit that perfectly matched her hair and accented her golden eyes. She kissed Lily on the cheek, snatched 2 more slices of melon from her plate, and walked straight toward the curved wall of spun glass. It opened like an iris at her approach, and Willa stepped out onto an enormous oak branch that wound its way down to the ground. In a flash, she was off through the grove with all the exuberance of youth. Up in the nest, Lily watched her daughter until she vanished among the trees. With a nod, the door shrank to nothing. She walked over to a luminaria sphere floating nearby and tapped it twice. Holly's face appeared, like an apparition in a crystal ball. "She's on her way," said Lily. "Are you sure she's ready for passage?" "The purpose of passage is to find out if she's ready," Holly reminded her. "I ken that," said Lily, "but she's only 13. Holly fixed her ice blue eyes on Lily. "Then she's about to grow up very quickly." Change of scene. Dozens of spectators were gathered around the large game court, cheering several teens that stood on 2-foot-wide hexagons of various colors that made up the playing field. Poppy Russo, an intense human girl of 13 with smooth mocha skin, coal-black hair, and deep brown eyes, stood on a white hex and studied the screen with single-minded focus. Braylon, a crimson-scaled Shunzai alien about the same age, stood on an adjacent white hex. "Gold has got to appear in the grouping over there," he said. Poppy shook her head. "No, that doesn't feel right." A gong rang out from the display speaker. The players jumped into the air all at once, some straight up, several to one side, a few sprang diagonally. The hexes shifted colors under them, and they landed, some on white, some on colored ones, a couple of players on black. The players who landed on the black hexes moaned and left the field. Poppy, Braylon, and a handful of other teens remained. Braylon pointed to a position a few hexagons away. "I'm telling you, it's a fractal progression." Poppy ignored her friend and stared at a nearby black hex. The ghost of a gold 6-pointed star appeared in her vision. The gong sounded again. Braylon went one way, and Poppy leapt toward the black hex. The field shifted, and Poppy landed. The black hex had turned to a gold star, as she had envisioned. The gong repeated 6 times, announcing her as the winner. The spectators cheered as Poppy raised her arms in victory. Braylon, smack in the middle of a black hex, fixed on Poppy, exasperated. "How do you always know?" "Women's intuition," Poppy said with a wink. "You're 13. Everyone knows girls mature much faster than boys. The crowd dispersed and the teens congratulated Poppy on her win. She caught a glimpse of Willa in the nearby field, waved goodbye to her friends, and ran to catch up. "Willa, wait!" Willa slowed her pace until Poppy joined her, and they continued across the field together. Willa glanced back at the game court. "What's that make it, Poppy? 10 wins in a row?" Willa said. 12, Poppy said with pride. "I'm going for lucky 13 next month." "Do the other players know that you cheat?" "Mom says it's not cheating to use your natural ability." Sounds like something a nocturnal would say. "Jealous?" Poppy prodded with a wicked smile. Willa returned the smile. "Me? Jealous of you? I'll outpace you soon enough. You'll be as old as Holly by then. And as wise," Willa quipped. Poppy shook her dark locks. "You never struck me as the type to go through the training." Willa stopped, taken aback. "Oh, thanks." "I don't mean that in a bad way," Poppy said quickly. "Just that, well, most of the cryptics and nocturnals I've met have sticks up their butts." Willa raised an eyebrow. "What about your mother? Her most of all, Poppy said. Sticks up their butts, Willa repeated. Humans have such charming expressions. Poppy smiled. You love us. I know. What's wrong with me? The girls laughed. Holly can be frustrating at times, Willa said, but she's not stuck up. Maybe a little annoying. She's a cryptic, Poppy said. Annoying is part of the job description. Willa smiled. Then you'd make an excellent one. Poppy accepted the remark as a compliment and bowed. Thanks, but I won't be walking the rocky road to Port Dublin Lodge any time soon if it's all the same to you. Besides, shapeshifters give me the creeps. Will you walk me as far as the Shaddock? Willa said. Will you promise to come to my next game? Promise. They locked arms and headed across the field, then skirted the edge of the yew grove in silence. Willa was reluctant to voice her next thought. Your mother. Was it difficult for her? The training? Poppy said. Why? Because us lowly humans don't have your fancy hybrid genes? I didn't mean it like that, Willa said. It's okay. It is tougher for humans, which is one reason I don't mind cheating at hexes. Maybe you should join in and even the odds. Thanks, but I have no time for games. Oh, now who's got a stick up her butt? They reached the Shaddock and shared a hug. Poppy's eyes locked with Willa's. Word of advice? Human or hybrid, the training changes you. My mom's not the same person she used to be. Make sure you don't lose yourself. Poppy's words unsettled Willa. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, she said with false bravado as she stepped through the Shaddock portal and vanished. Chapter 2. The Black League. The Empire has cast a shadow over our lives and given birth to a great irony, that we must search within that shadow to find the light that will dispel it. By Darva Val-Atten, the founder of the Black League. The rogue gas giant planet floated through the black expanse of space, not tethered to any star. Deep blue storms of swirling gas were driven not by the heat of a sun, but by radiation emanating deep within its titanic core. Orbiting the nameless giant was a coal-black moon the size of Mars. Its staggered surface was tiled with dark crystal outcroppings that reflected the dim indigo light of its parent planet. Deep within the moon, a network of chambers and tunnels had been carved in the obsidian rock that served as the secret sanctuary for the Black League, a literal underground resistance movement dedicated to overthrowing the oppressive overlords of their homeworld, Zos. The League had been fighting the overlords for as long as Brim could remember, and tomorrow would be the 16th anniversary of his naming. Brim had grown into a strapping young man with the green eyes and golden brown skin that was typical of his people. Brim's father, Dennick, and his mother, Alara, had been members of the League for over 30 years. Brim had been born within the deepest chambers of the Dark Moon and had never set foot on Zos, nor even seen the planet other than on the tactical screens in the central command chamber. Brim would sometimes download images of Zos onto his personal tablet and study them for hours. Scenes of the lush forests and crystal-clear seas of ancient Zos, as it was in the days of his distant ancestors, would clash with recent recon images of the dark steel towers that loomed over the stark expanse of gray stone apartment blocks that housed the downtrodden population. As foreboding as the towers were, none matched the ominous presence of the Citadel, a massive steel mountain that rose in the center of Arcana, Zos's capital city. Ensconced within the Citadel's peak was the Eyrie, a hive of surveillance monitors and quantum computers constantly sifting through trillions of data points per second in the relentless search for any sign of dissent or discord among the enslaved populace. Brim knew that an unspeakable beast was sequestered in the black heart of the Eyrie, its pale eyes fixed on the monitor banks as though feeding on the streams of data that poured into the Citadel all hours of the day. The beast's name was Zos Asura, the Archon of the Overlords. Even at a distance of 30 light-years, Brim felt a slight shiver of fear as he gazed at the Citadel's imposing image on his tablet. After his 16th naming day, he'd be old enough to officially join the Resistance and accompany his parents and other League members on their clandestine missions, most of which were extremely dangerous. Many of Brim's friends in the League had lost at least one parent in the struggle, if not both, so Brim considered himself very lucky to still have a mother and a father. A knock on Brim's airlock-style door interrupted his reverie. "Come." Gar, an older man of military bearing with close-cropped white hair and a weathered mahogany complexion, entered and plopped himself down in front of a tactics game board. He wore the dark gray tunic and pants with black knee-high boots that was typical of the garb of the resistance. Several red, white, and black hexagonal stone pieces were spread across the playing surface of the metal tactics board. Gar studied the layout with his one good eye, the other eye, milky white in the center of an angry crimson scar that slanted across his brow and cheek, made Brim's skin crawl whenever Gar looked at him. Your grasp of strategy is coming along nicely. A few more lessons and you might even win a game. Is there any word from my father? Brim asked the elder soldier. He'll be back when he's back, Gar said, never lifting his gaze from the game board. He reached out with one thick, gnarled hand and moved a red playing piece to block a white one. There, let's see you get out of that one. A klaxon sounded through the tunnels outside Brim's chamber, alerting everyone to the approach of a ship. Within moments, the doors parted to admit Brim's mother, Alara. Her bright green eyes matched the flight suit that blazed against her smooth cocoa skin. She stood framed in the circular doorway. Gar stood at attention. Alara, he said with a slight bow of respect. At ease, Gar, she said, and turned her attention to her son. It's your father's ship, she said. Her voice trembled slightly. Brim could tell she was holding her emotions in check until she knew for certain that his father had made it back alive. Brim tapped his tablet off, and they all marched briskly down the corridor toward the docking bay, the three of them on pins and needles. The docking bay was a large circular chamber surrounded by several smaller circular bays, each capable of servicing a 100-foot diameter starship. Dennick's ship, a gunmetal gray disc named the Shield, lowered into one of the bays, its gravitic field discharging intermittent bolts of electricity as it came in contact with the steel ribs that reinforced the bay walls. A thick airlock dome sealed overhead once the ship settled into its berth. A smaller airlock opened into the larger central chamber, where Brim waited with his mother amid several others eager for news of Dennick's mission. Brim's father, a tall, lean, muscular man with mahogany skin, a shaved head, and a heart-melting smile, strode through the airlock in a crimson flight suit along with his flight crew. His pale, blue-green eyes locked onto Alara and Brim. Without breaking stride, he headed for them and enveloped them both in a crushing hug. He planted a kiss on Alara's full lips and another on the top of Brim's black locks. I have a gift for you, son. He dug into a pocket and extracted a small, flat rock, divided equally into a black side and a white side. He held it out to Brim, who took it, slightly puzzled. Alara was astonished. You made it to the forge without being detected? I don't understand, said Brim. It's a rock. It's a piece of Zos, a piece of our homeworld, Dennick said with the awe and reverence usually reserved for rare gems, a symbol of what we're fighting for. I got it for your 16th naming day. It's a rock, Brim repeated, doing his best to sound grateful. Not just any rock, his father assured him. It's from the Forge, the place where the resistance began on Zos after the overlords arrived. Plus, it's a very rare polarity stone, perfectly split into black and white. It symbolizes our struggle against the forces of darkness who've stolen our world from us. Dennick glanced at the other League members surrounding him. Gar, call a council meeting. I have news. Gar gave Dennick a crisp military nod and hurried off at a pace that belied his advanced age. Dennick and Alara headed across the docking bay toward the airlock that led to the council chamber. Brim remained where he was, turning the polarity stone over in his hand, trying to feel the importance that his father had placed on it. Dennick glanced back, rested his gaze on his son. Are you coming, Brim? Brim's emerald eyes snapped upward. Me? Attend a council meeting? You are turning 16 tomorrow, or have we miscounted? Alara teased. Brim clutched the stone in his palm and ran to join them. They passed through the airlock and led the other League members down a tunnel. Change of scene. Zosasura stood on the balcony of his eyrie at the uppermost level of the citadel. His pale alien eyes scanned the surrounding city of Arcana, a monotonous patchwork of dull stone and steel cloisters that stretched to the horizon in all directions, punctuated here and there by tall black sentry towers, manned by the ever-vigilant security drones. His pallid gray skin was stretched tight over a cadaverous frame that stood 6.5 feet tall, held together by an iron will more than by mere muscle and bone. He was dressed in titanium military armor, rather than the black tunic, leggings, and knee-high boots favored by the overlords under his command. Zosasura believed it was his duty as Archon to present nothing less than a powerful and unwavering image to the populace, lest they perceive any hint of weakness in those that ruled over them. Constant vigilance to ensure that order was maintained in the face of the threat posed by the resistance was a small price to pay for the nearly limitless power the overlords wielded for the past 1,000 years. However, Zosasura was no idealist. He knew full well that every archon that had come before him and every one that would come after would face dissent from a small but vocal minority. The Black League, despite their frustrating talent for remaining hidden, was still just a minor annoyance in the long history of the overlord's rule. The planet Zos was the center of an ever-expanding empire, presently in control of the wealth and resources of 20 worlds within a 100 light-year sphere. Those worlds and the subjects upon them had been hard-won, annexed by the empire slowly over time, after long, bloody battles that took a heavy toll on ships and resources, not to mention the cost of growing thousands of new biosynthetic soldiers in the genetic tanks. But now, a gift from the elder gods had been placed in Zosasura's hands, along with an opportunity to expand the Archon's reach far beyond the present borders of the Empire. Strangers from over 1,000 light years away, possessing a powerful, previously unimagined technology, had been captured by a sentry patrol after the stranger's ship had been damaged by the Maelstrom, a swirling anomaly of violent electromagnetic storms and ever-shifting gravity waves that formed the farthest border of the Empire and could tear a starship apart in seconds. Only the stranger's advanced technology had saved them from annihilation. Their crippled ship drifted between the stars of the Empire for a year before the crew, their supplies nearly depleted, had been found and transported to the Citadel. Granted, the survivors had been reluctant to divulge the secrets of their tech to the overlords, but Zosasura's interrogators were particularly persuasive, and as the Archon gazed out over Arcana, he knew it was only a matter of time before his legion of scientists adapted the stranger's technology to their own ships, that, when fitted with Zoshi energy weapons, would be able to cross the Maelstrom intact and traverse the 1,300 light-years to the planet the strangers called Earth. Capturing such a prize and vastly extending the borders of the Empire would consolidate Zosasura's prestige and power in ways no overlord had before, thus cementing his rule and rendering him impervious to the power-hungry machinations of the other overlords who constantly plotted to usurp his throne. However, ruling such a vast empire wouldn't be easy. The Archon knew he'd have to rely on a few trusted overlords, one most of all, to maintain order across the light years between Zos and Earth. Zosasura had been grooming that overlord for years for just such a task, but he knew it would be foolish to assume that his protege was without ambition, or beyond plotting her own rise to power. He would have to make sure his bribe was sufficient to buy her unwavering loyalty. There is one more chapter here. Do you want me to read it, or is this sufficient? You sure? Yes. All right. Chapter 3, Port Dublin. Strangely, after the landing, it took much longer for humans to accept the hybrids into their society than it took to accept the gray beings, who we sometimes refer to as whelks, or other extraterrestrials. For all their inherent xenophobia, humans were far more suspicious of the half-human hybrids that could blend in among them than of the alien beings who clearly stood out. An excerpt from A Hybrid History by Holly Cotton. Port Dublin straddled the wide river that was once known as the Grand Canal, a narrow channel that hundreds of years ago transported boats from the inland villages to the sea. Long before deconstruction and restoration, the oceans had slowly risen due to a warming global climate, inundating all the coastal cities. While enormous numbers of the population moved farther inland, many remained to rebuild their homes into multi-level villages anchored to the remaining island clusters, with connecting bridges and wide walkways high above the surface of the sea. Willa and Holly strolled along the broad Marrowbone Bridge amid the daily throng of hybrids, humans, and aliens that populated the coastal village. Living in far country, interacting mostly with family and friends, Willa was a bit overwhelmed by the melange of alien races that populated Port Dublin. A whelk glanced at Willa with its large black eyes as it passed. The odd nickname was bestowed upon the diminutive gray aliens by the locals due to the similarity of their gray skin to the large local sea snail of the same name. 3 amphibious nomos from the Sirius star system were hunkered around a table on the shady veranda of the Stargazer Inn, sipping water and awaiting cooler temperatures. Even other hybrids similar to Willa and Holly were a mix of traits that hinted at more exotic genes somewhere in the family lineage. Here and there, a human would stand out among the interstellar inhabitants. As Willa had learned, even they were an ancient recipe composed of indigenous hominids and a long-lost race of extraterrestrials that visited Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago. "Isn't the lodge in the other direction? Where are we going?" Willa prodded. "As far as we need to," answered Holly in typical cryptic fashion. Willa sighed with mild exasperation and figured that she'd know soon enough. She continued to gaze at the fascinating denizens of Port Dublin. A being at the far end of the bridge caught Willa's eye. A being so odd, so unusual, it reduced the potpourri of alien beings around it to a single race by comparison. It stood at least 8 feet tall. Its muscled body was covered with smooth brown and gray fur like a sea otter, except for its broad face, the palms of its enormous hands, and the soles of its huge feet. The creature possessed a prominent brow ridge, deep-set brown eyes, and flaring leonine nostrils. It ignored the unabashed stares from all other beings that skirted around the behemoth and fixed Willa with its unwavering gaze. Willa discreetly tugged on Holly's sleeve. "What is that?" Holly glanced at the being. "Ah, there he is. That's Argus, your new mentor." Willa gaped. "My what?" "I'm still your sponsor," Holly explained, "but different mentors will guide you at each level of your apprenticeship. Argus is a Divinorum master. He can teach you how to open your senses to a larger world than can be seen with your eyes." Willa couldn't take her eyes off Argus. "I've never seen anyone like him." "Argus's people are ancient and known by many names," Holly said. "Almas, Narcuna, the Old Ones, Yeti, Susquehannock, but most used to call them Sasquatch in the days before the landing. They're the natural people of the Earth who evolved from the early hominids, not altered by extraterrestrial genes." Holly and Willa stood before Argus, who lowered his intense gaze to meet theirs. Holly bowed her head in greeting. Argus did the same, then waited until Willa caught on that she was to follow suit. Willa bowed and Argus responded in kind. Without a word, Argus turned and in 3 giant strides stepped off the end of the bridge onto a wide wooden walkway that led to the northern lodge, a large 3-story timbered hall anchored by a massive stone chimney that rose above the slate-shingled roof. The lodge was used exclusively by the quorum of cryptics, nocturnals, shapeshifters, and sages for social gatherings and important meetings, although it rarely hosted all members of the quorum at once. The Sasquatch ducked under the heavy crossbeam of the high entry door. Holly and Willa followed him inside. A great fire roared under a huge copper cauldron in the giant hearth. A thick brown liquid bubbled in the cauldron and filled the room with a pungent aroma that wrinkled Willa's nose. An intricate circular Celtic design ringed with 5 symbols, a triangle, a wavy line, an arch, a circle, and a dot, was inlaid in the wooden floor in the center of the great room. Argus made a point of walking around it as he crossed to the far wall and disappeared into an anteroom. Willa pointed to the symbols. "What are those?" "They symbolize the 5 levels of mastery," Holly said. "Land, sea, sky, space, and spirit, representing the cryptics, nocturnals, shapeshifters, sages, and wraiths." Holly stood by the crackling fire and inhaled the steam that rose from the bubbling brew. She wrinkled her nose and nodded her approval. "Good batch. Very potent." "I hope that's not lunch," Willa said with mild disgust. "No," Holly said. "That's Divinorum. It's used in sacred rituals. Argus is a master brewer. You're lucky to have him. My Susquehannock mentor wasn't so good at it. I couldn't hold down any food for 3 days." Willa blanched. "You mean I'm supposed to drink that?" "It's essential to the rite of passage if you wish to become a cryptic." "What does it do?" "It opens doors within the mind," Holly said. "Doors to other realms that can't be unlocked in any other way." For the first time since her training began, Willa wondered if she'd chosen the right path in life. She'd heard stories, mostly vague snippets and hints, about the mysterious rituals of the nocturnals and the shapeshifters, but it was always assumed that learning to be a cryptic was more about studies and maybe a few meditation exercises. It was one thing to sit in the woods by the stream at Three Rock, listening to Holly's lessons on time, space, parallel realities, and other esoteric concepts that Willa found fascinating. But even Holly's tall tales about talking trees were preferable to ingesting some foul-smelling, mind-altering brew cooked up by a mysterious furry giant. "Maybe I should talk to my parents first," Willa offered. "They know," Holly assured her. "I explained the ritual to them before I took you on as an apprentice." "Why wasn't I told?" Willa asked, trying not to sound hurt. "Part of being a cryptic is to expect the unexpected. Part of being a mentor is to see how you respond to the unexpected." Argus ducked onto the anteroom door as he strode back into the great room. He carried a small golden cup that looked like a thimble in his gigantic hand. Argus passed the cup to Holly, looked at Willa, and pointed to the ornate ring on the floor. "Argus show, you go," the Sasquatch grumbled in a voice that grated like gravel. Willa glanced at Holly, who nodded her assurance at Argus's instruction. Argus repeated his gesture. Willa walked over and sat dead center in the circle. Holly dipped the cup into the steaming brew, strolled over, and handed it to Willa. "When you're ready, just take a single sip." Willa glanced at the huge cauldron and then at the diminutive cup in her hands. "All of that for this? You're not the only apprentice going through passage today," Holly commented. "Just the first." Willa stared down at the brown liquid in her cup. "What if I don't pass the test?" "Not everyone's cut out to be a cryptic. There's no shame in taking another path," Holly said. She sat on the floor on one side of the hearth. Argus set his huge bulk down on the other side. They both closed their eyes and sank into silent meditation. Willa looked at them, a pair of wildly mismatched bookends. She took a deep breath of courage and brought the golden cup to her lips. She sipped the Divinorum, winced at the taste, and gently placed the cup on the floor. Willa closed her eyes and waited for the unexpected. Change of scene. Thorn paced in a wide circle around the base of Willa's treehouse, to the point where he was wearing a rut in the grass. Lily peered down at him now and then during the past few hours, wishing there was something she could say to put Thorn at ease. Truth be told, Lily was just as nervous, waiting for word from Willa regarding her passage. Lily filled 2 cups with water, stepped through the iris onto the oak branch, and descended to the base of the tree just in time to meet Thorn as he completed his latest lap. "You sure you wouldn't rather wait inside?" Lily said as she offered him a cup. He stopped and took a sip. "Thank you, Mother Hillicrissing, but I'm good," Thorn replied. "I've asked you to call me Lily." "My father would think it impolite," Thorn said. Lily sat on one of the large twisted tree roots, felt the cool grass between her toes, and allowed her concerns to float away on the gentle afternoon breeze. She gestured to another large tree root across from her. "Please join me." Thorn hesitated and forced himself to sit. Lily gathered her thoughts, but noticed Thorn's legs bouncing with nervous energy. Thorn caught her glance, crossed his legs to quiet them, and took another sip, self-conscious. "Do you mind if I ask you a question about your father?" Lily asked. Thorn would have preferred any other question, but nodded rather than rebuffing Willa's mother. "What was the last thing your father said to you before he left?" Lily asked. The question took Thorn by surprise. He tried to push that memory from his mind, but Lily's inquiry pulled his thoughts back to the day at the spaceport over a year ago. He swallowed the lump in his throat and took a deep breath. "He was very excited about the expedition to the Orion sector," Thorn began. "The region's still mostly unexplored. He said there were reports about an anomaly he wanted to investigate, something about how it might prove certain theories of space and time." Thorn hoped that that would satisfy Lily. "Go on," Lily prompted. Thorn struggled through the pain. "I was worried because he'd never traveled that far from Earth before. He told me, never be afraid to explore the unknown because that's where all the secrets live. I guess Will is exploring something similar. I hope that..." Thorn lowered his gaze to the ground. Lily gently lifted his chin until his moist eyes met hers. "Don't worry, Will is a strong girl. She'll be fine." Thorn wiped his tears away. "Are you sure? Rowan said, what if she becomes a wraith, or worse, a banshee?" "Rowan told you rumors, but even if that were the case, it wouldn't stop Willa. If there's one thing I know about my daughter, it's that she always follows her heart." Lily smiled at him and said, "And I've grown fond of you as well," she teased. Thorn managed a soft smile, slightly embarrassed. "When do you think we'll hear from her?" "Passage is different for everyone. It could be minutes, hours, or even days. We must trust the timing," Lily said. "Aren't you supposed to start your training soon?" Thorn hesitated, looked down at the ground. "What is it?" Lily pressed. "Rowan said Well, I don't know, maybe it's not my path, Thorn admitted. Lily understood. You wanted to be with Willa. Thorn nodded, eyes still downcast. Yes, but Lily laid her hand on his shoulder. She's not the only reason you want to become an initiate. Your mother, now your father, both missing in space, your brother following in their footsteps, hopefully not literally. You feel safer on the ground, don't you? Thorn nodded, too choked up to answer. 3 years ago, his mother, Celandine Ashgrove, had been on a diplomatic mission to the planet Shan, a new member of the Interstellar Alliance, when her ship, the Phoenix, mysteriously disappeared with all hands before reaching their destination. There were dozens of confusing and contradictory stories about Celandine's fate after she vanished. One said she had gone undercover on a covert mission for the Contact Council, a rumor they adamantly denied. Another tale emerged that the alien inhabitants of Shan had hijacked the Phoenix for some clandestine purpose, which their government also denied. And an even more unlikely theory was proposed, that Celandine's ship had unknowingly passed too close to a recently formed black hole and been caught in the gravitational prison of its event horizon. Thorn couldn't bring himself to believe that any of the rumors were true, but was at a loss to explain his mother's absence. Now that he and his brother had been orphaned by the disappearance of their father, Thorn was just as likely to feel that a family curse was as good a theory as any. Thorn wiped at his tears. But what if Willa wants someone besides me? Sages may be able to manipulate time and space, but no one knows for sure what the future will bring, Lily said. Give Willa some time to figure out who she is and what she wants. Lily took a sip from her cup to help her think. She took Thorn's cup and set it next to her. Cup your hands, she told Thorn. He frowned, puzzled, but obeyed. Lily poured some of her water into his hands. Drink. Thorn sipped some of the water. Now close your fists, she instructed. Thorn did so, and the water squeezed from his grip. What have you learned, she said. That it's easier to drink from a cup, he said. Lily laughed. Love is like water. You can only hold on to it if you don't squeeze too tight. And if I open my hands too far? He spread his palms and the water poured onto the ground. Lily glanced down at the puddle. Well, it's a balancing act, she said. Thorn sighed. Thanks, Mother Lily. I feel better, sort of. She patted his hand. Oh, you think I did this for you? I'm shaky as a willow in a wildfire. They both laughed. Lily stood. It's time for midday meal. I have fresh berries from Bluebell's garden if you'd care to join me. Thorn smiled, followed Lily up the winding branch into the nest, and secretly hoped that with her mouth full of berries, she wouldn't ask any more questions about his father or his mother. That's the end of chapter 3. Thank you. Thanks. You enjoying it? Yay! There are 18 more chapters in the book. So do I. So do I. So thank you for listening to that. And I will go ahead and allow Bashar to come through. Did you want to say something? Okay. Okay, and allow Bashar to come through. And please have fun. I'll see you later.